So the marketing trends that are typically taking place today have to do about bootstrapping, which means that you get creative, you get resourceful in marketing. You don't spend this boatload of money. And we'll talk about guerrilla marketing in the next lecture. Conversation marketing, and that's where you're trying to get viral effects. You're trying to get people to talk. Technology, whether it's big data, multiple sensors, and everything else. How do I use that data? And then there's visionary marketing, and people are trying to create what is going to be the next big experience for people. And so Mark Cuban's actually invested in some of those companies. So what are my goals in communication? Well, these are the main 5 factors. And the one we talked about in marketing that's so important is, how do I persuade people? How do I move people in a certain direction? And so the way you persuade people is you can use multiple techniques, but the basic techniques are you do it through logic, you do it through emotion, negative, coercion. Can you find a way to try to force people and push them along? And rhetoric, and that's effective speaking and writing. When you present information, you should think about presenting like economists. And what I mean by economists is, what do economists do? Economists take large amounts of information and they distill it into something simple that you can understand. One of my big advantages in my career is that I've always competed against engineers. And engineers, they like to get technical and fall in love with their technology. And while they were doing that, I was communicating to managers and executives in a simple, clear way. So that way I would always win arguments. And so in terms of presenting like a economist, what I mean is, what is your story? If you don't have a story for what your data you're presenting, you're going to lose people. Pictures. A lot of people think visually. And so if they can picture it in their mind, they can remember it. And numbers. You need something concrete to back everything up in your story so it has validity. And numbers and data are ways that you can back up what you're doing. Now, in terms of an example of this, here's my story. We need to get rid of political parties. The 2 political parties are constantly fighting. There's tribalism. Nothing's getting done. Our system is broken. So we need to get rid of these associations so Congress can get back to work. And my story and the pictures I use is showing, look, this is how many bills are passed. And to make it more concrete, this is the amount of spending that's gone up drastically over the last 50 years. So we're paying more for them to do less. And so, as you can see, story, pictures, numbers. Rhetoric is about the effective way of using speech, and it's based on emotion, logic, and character. Your branding also touches on this. What's the emotion, the logic, and your brand is about character, that people believe that your product has credibility. It can be extremely powerful and trivial, and it's what you say and how you say it. And so, for example, how stupid does he think I am? It's called rhetorical because you asked it, but there's an implied answer. Saying things with repetition. I can say, it's a bad, bad world. Now notice my tone, notice the pacing and everything else. I'm saying this very seriously versus saying, it's a bad, bad world. And so people just think I'm joking. And so this is part of rhetoric. And repetition, repeating things, is a form of pounding something in. Is there a digital rhetoric? Yes, there is. And that's that the way they do layouts of websites and things like that are designed to influence you. The pages that you go through and everything else. So we won't be going through that in this class. Yeah, you're going to hear this a lot, but if you're really interested in doing it, then take my digital marketing class. And so in terms of digital communication, these are the things that impact your effectiveness in communication. And I'll let you look at that on your own. But some of the keys in storytelling and why it's so important is that people remember story. We do less so with facts. Not only that, but our brains actually release a chemical when we relate to something. So if we can relate to a story, that's why it stays with us. Like if I tell you Goldilocks and the Three Bears, everybody knows that story and everybody remembers that story. It resonates with us. In terms of planning, how do you plan your story? What's your objective? Is there tension? Meaning if I tell you vanilla is a good flavor, where's the tension? And the thing is, tension doesn't necessarily need to be negative. It could be positive tension. Vanilla is actually formed from a very special root, and it's extremely powerful. But why people love vanilla is that there's this burst of flavor in your mouth. See, that's tension. Also how you pace your story, and eventually there has to be a payoff. It's like, what's the conclusion? And so the elements that drive that story is how clear are you? Is it easy to understand? How do you connect? And what's your level of emotion that goes into your storytelling? And so the crux of communication is that normally the person you're communicating with is here, and you're here. You're not going to get to them in one shot. So what you need to do is you have to figure out how many steps do I think they need to go through. This is part of the reason why we have a funnel. And that's that you can't go from awareness to sales. Now, some people can do it, but in general, it's too difficult. And that's why they broke it up into the steps of the funnel. Why? Because each is a distinct phase that a customer has to go through, and you understand that step enough that you know what's the effective things to do it. An example of steps is, I want you to give you all your savings, or give me $10,000. And I have a new financial investment system, and I'm going to make you oodles of money back. Well, most people will say, no. And so what I would then do is talk about my model and the math and everything else, and then I would say to you, give me $100 and let me prove myself. Or I could take the risk out altogether and say, if I don't make you at least 10% on your $100, I'll give you the money back. So the question, now if you notice, the second part of guaranteeing the money is even a smaller step. And so the question is, what steps can they absorb? Some of the issues of our time, such as pro-choice versus pro-life or gun control or whatever, the parties are too far apart. And so neither side is going to go to the other. And the thing that neither sides understand is you have to take intermediate steps and bring yourself closer if you ever want to get to your goal. And so what we've talked about in this lecture is how communication is a technique that drives branding. It can take many forms, and digital media can be extremely powerful just because of the tremendous reach that you've never had before. But the thing you're concerned about that is, how do I measure it? How do I personalize it? How do I feel like I'm just not the one of a million? And part of it is also status quo. The thing is, we see a lot of things come up, a lot of the themes come up over and over again.